So everybody ready for the panel and for a great discussion on what next and how the different governments can work together to accelerate this transformation, knowing that we have already back quite an ambitious goal. I have to remember that we all signed it in the Paris Agreement, and we said that we want to limit the global temperature rise to below 1.5. And this is quite difficult. This is quite a task, and we need to change so many things around that we wonder how we can combine the different things, ensuring the security of supply, how we can phase out from fossil fuels as soon as possible, but at the same time to take care of the prosperity that our population, our society wants to enjoy. And it's certain that this decade is going to be crucial. And this decade is a turbulent decade. We are sometimes facing the difficulties of having the phase-out processes not properly aligned with the phase-in processes. So we grow a lot in renewable energy and new solutions, but even in that context, we may need to triple, and we are still doubling. And at the same time, the tensions are there around the phase out of the traditional ways to respond to the energy needs. And in this context, we have lots of fascinating tasks: legislation, incentive and innovation policies, how we can ensure that relevant energy vector for end users as hydrogen is used there where it is most efficient. And I think that this session brings us a good opportunity to exchange views on how the different perspectives in your countries, in our countries are, and how we are foreseeing, how we are planning, how we are working with the private communities, so to ensure that this can happen. So I think that it is important to build together and to ensure that governments are the facilitators for this to happen. And this is something that is the main context for this discussion. I will start with a question to be sure that each speaker can introduce and can comment around the main issues that are under discussion. The starting question could be: what one action has your government taken to enable the green hydrogen revolution that you would like to highlight? So, not easy to highlight, to pick one issue, one question. And I would start with Minister Matías Culfas. The minister is an economist from the University of Buenos Aires, but also has a great experience in the public sector in Argentina. Now, as Argentina's Minister for Productive Development. Minister, before I ask you the first question, like the rest of the panelists, I would like to hand over the baton from Barcelona to the city of Bariloche as the host of the next International Green Hydrogen Congress in March 2023. So our friendship is ensured for next year. That's good news. Congratulations. And Minister, at COP26, his government announced a major green hydrogen project that could mobilize 8.4 billion worth of investment. What actions would you share with us? What could you pick up from your one action reference in this moment?
Thank you very much. Muchas gracias, Ministra Rivera. También nos complace que Bariloche sea la sede de la futura asamblea de Green Hydrogen. Así que muy felices de que esto se pueda concretar. Para responder a su pregunta, me gustaría dividirlo en 4 o 5 aspectos que me parecen centrales. El primero tiene que ver con las cuestiones tecnológicas y productivas, y ahí destacar que Argentina posee las mejores capacidades en términos de generación eólica, los mejores índices de producción eólica, los vientos de la Patagonia en el sur del país, también los mejores índices de radiación para la energía solar en las provincias del noroeste argentino. Por eso no es casualidad que en esta asamblea haya una gobernadora de la Patagonia y un gobernador del noroeste argentino, con lo cual tenemos excelentes capacidades junto a una geografía que permite el desarrollo extensivo de este tipo de actividad, con lo cual entendemos que están dadas las condiciones para una producción en escala que permita generar las estructuras de costos que terminen viabilizando esta producción para su comercialización internacional. Y estamos convencidos que Argentina tiene una capacidad tecnológica productiva para llegar a 2030 produciendo cerca de 10 millones de toneladas de hidrógeno verde. Para que eso sea posible, obviamente, tenemos que estructurar una demanda internacional consistente, los mecanismos de financiamiento y, por supuesto, de inversión directa. Y ahí viene el segundo desafío, que tiene que ver con el marco regulatorio. Estamos trabajando en una estrategia de hidrógeno y en un proyecto de ley que ya ha sido anunciado por nuestro presidente, que va a ser tratado por el Congreso este año, justamente para generar el marco de estabilidad en términos fiscales, de confianza de la inversión, de los beneficios asociados a la inversión, para que se puedan concretar inversiones como la que usted acaba de mencionar, que es una inversión anunciada por Fortescue y que está avanzando con muy buenos pasos en la provincia de Río Negro. Hay un tercer aspecto que tiene que ver con el trabajo hacia las comunidades. Tenemos que trabajar en evitar errores del pasado, donde muchos de estos proyectos vinculados a recursos naturales estaban estructurados como economías de enclave. Es fundamental que se transfiera tecnología a los países en desarrollo, como el caso de la Argentina, que las comunidades perciban los beneficios concretos en términos de mayores empleos, de mejora de las infraestructuras, de salud, educación, asociadas a inversiones de semejante envergadura, que haya justamente una relación armónica con las comunidades y un desarrollo de proveedores, que las pequeñas y medianas empresas del país puedan ser contratadas y integrarse a esta gran cadena global de valor del hidrógeno verde. Y creo que hay un cuarto aspecto que tiene que ver con la comunicación, con explicar lo que significa este cambio trascendental para la humanidad, para la estructura productiva del país. Insistimos, comprometer a las comunidades en este proyecto. Por eso también celebramos la realización de esta asamblea, porque es un ámbito justamente que reúne a diferentes sectores y que esperamos que pueda seguir creciendo.
Muchas gracias, Ministro. Thank you so much for your comments. I think that it is, well, you have combined different pieces for your hydrogen strategy, and you have underlined this vocation, so to be an exporter, a net exporter of hydrogen, which is interesting. And you have underlined something which is very important, and that could bring us to the United Kingdom, one of the first developers of the offshore wind. It's true that the wind and the sun do not belong to anyone, so already it is an advantage, so to produce renewable energy and to count on the resources that we have around us. And I think that this is also part of what the United Kingdom must have in mind when thinking about their hydrogen strategy. I am happy to continue with Mr. Greg Hans, who is the Minister of State for Business, Energy and Clean Growth of the United Kingdom. Previously, he was Minister of State for Trade Policy in the Department for International Trade. So both dimensions, industrial and trade, are part of your experience. But I think that the curiosity here is what does this mean, this announcement coming from the UK government on a strategy to scale up green hydrogen production and this launch of a subsidy scheme so to facilitate this kickoff in your country? What government actions have followed these announcements? What are the key priorities looking ahead? What is your one action you would like to underline? Thank you.
Well, thank you, Teresa, and thank you for welcoming me, and a great pleasure to be here in Barcelona at this Congress and participating. I would say I take a very high-level view on this. I think the best thing a government can do in this space is to first to show leadership, and secondly to show a consistency of policy. Our Prime Minister Boris Johnson has shown right the way through his time as Prime Minister a strong interest in hydrogen. You can trace that from the Prime Minister's 10-point plan for a green industrial revolution in the autumn of when he became Prime Minister, through to our net zero strategy, which we launched at the time of hosting COP26, through to now, as you rightly say, Teresa, the British energy security strategy. And the leadership that I think you've seen you mentioned offshore wind, the vaccine rollout and so on, I think it's really important for politicians to show leadership. And the secondly, I think, is the consistency of policy, that we might move policy a little bit, like we recently doubled our ambition on hydrogen to go from 5 gigawatts to 10 gigawatts, but it's all kind of in a consistent direction would be the second thing that I would say. I think also laying out the roadmap. You told us, Teresa, about your roadmap for hydrogen, the UK roadmap. We've just launched our hydrogen business model to show exactly what we are seeking from the business sector, because whilst governments will set the policy framework and will show the leadership, it's ultimately going to be the private sector that is going to deliver in this space. So we've set our hydrogen business model with support from the government, a net zero hydrogen fund of £240 million to help kickstart the private sector into doing the right things. I think we're also very interested in pilot projects. As with all things scaling up in new or nascent technology, pilot projects are really important. We'll shortly be launching our hydrogen village. We're also going to be looking at transport projects, eventually space heating, other things as well, using pilot projects. Earlier today, we had at the launch of the Congress 2 questions put to us. The first question from Bloomberg, how fast can you grow? And here, the emphasis on is having to grow really, really quickly. And let's face it, very few of us are producing much in the way of hydrogen at the moment. So we need to scale that up really quickly. We've set our target already doubling from here. I think Adair Turner asked us the importance of renewable energy. And here, our actual source of green hydrogen, it's all very well putting in place the policies, the electrolysis capability, the demand for hydrogen, but you need to have the renewable energy there to provide green hydrogen in the first place. Here in the same British energy security strategy, we're already the #1 in Europe for offshore wind, but we're not being complacent. We're going to quadruple that over the course of this decade to go from 11.4 gigawatts to 50 gigawatts is our ambition in this decade. Onshore wind and solar, which always surprises anybody from Spain that the UK is any good at solar, but we really are. In fact, solar, we've got more solar than we have offshore wind. So making sure that we've got the renewables, we're also investing in tidal power, where the UK really does have a big advantage in terms of our geography for when it comes to tidal. We're already doing projects. In the autumn, I visited the Whiteley wind farm, just south of Glasgow, which is Europe's 2nd largest onshore wind farm. And already we are putting money in to hydrogen there to make sure that the excess wind energy doesn't go to waste. And that's something which is in its early stages, but will be scaled up. So I think from a UK perspective, Teresa, there's also a lot of, we're very keen to cooperate internationally, of course, as always here. Working, very interested in today's launch of the green hydrogen standard here. Really keen for the UK to play its full role in setting the international parameters for hydrogen, making sure that we fulfill our COP obligations as well in this space. And the final word I'd say is this, Teresa, which I mentioned at the dinner last night. I'm going to return to being a politician for a moment. And one of the best things about hydrogen is it enables you to have a really powerful message in areas, industrialized areas of our countries, where you can send a solid message that there is a future. There is either a future for industry that is currently there, or there's a future in terms of hydrogen production in that place. So places like Hull, Teesside in the UK, hydrogen is a big part of the industrial future there. And anybody who says to me, Greg Hands, it's always the places of the industries of the past. These are places that are not going to vote for you, Mr. Greg Hands. I say, well, actually, one of our biggest electoral successes as a party, I would say, was our mayor of Teesside, Ben Houchen, who is evangelical about hydrogen and about new energies and about new technologies. And he is winning the Teesside mayoral race with 73% of the vote last year on this manifesto, delivering hydrogen, delivering clean growth to Teesside, which is an area really right at the heart of the first industrial revolution back in the 18th century. So that is kind of a key message for us, is actually also making sure it's part of our leveling up agenda to bring the rest of the country up to the levels that we see in London, the Southeast. So there's a key political agenda there as well, delivering for communities as well. Hydrogen is a key part of that.
So delivering for communities, working inland at the domestic context, using all your resources, but also thinking in the international context. So how to go, and we are in good hands, how to go from Glasgow to Sharm el Sheikh. So with some homework back home, we need to ensure that that this keeps up growing, and we are in a position to show not only commitment but action in many different places, so to fulfill what we want in this context. Thank you so much, Minister. And now I'm going to Indonesia. Indonesia is chairing the G20. You have a great responsibility in a complicated moment, and this is something that is probably a bit stressing. This discussion about energy, the climate, the cooperation worldwide in a context where we all are shaken by the situation is tricky. And we have the great pleasure to count on Ego Serial, the Secretary General from the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources in Indonesia. And you are in a very interesting position, so to understand the domestic goals and the challenges at home, but also in this responsibility, in this function, in coordinating this group of superpower countries, super powerful countries that count on how successful we can achieve our goals in climate and energy transition, or where the burdens, the difficulties may be. And in addition, Irina stresses Indonesia can produce competitive green hydrogen by 2029 in a very effective manner. So my question to you is, as in the other cases, what is your own one action, and how you think your country can take this opportunity to seize this potential, as well as how you see yourself in the context of the G20, so to push the others from Glasgow to Barcelona, from Barcelona to the G20, from the G20 to Bariloche in this hydrogen alliance.
Thank you, Teresa, and many thanks for inviting us to this assembly in a very nice city, Barcelona. First of all, I would like to mention that we have the common understanding that the hydrogen would be one of the main contributors to our energy transitions, and has the important role in decarbonizing the global energy system, and also as the energy storage. In case of Indonesia, we have make a roadmap for the energy transition to the net zero emission by 2060 or sooner. And we have put the hydrogen, one is the main source for the energy, clean energy for our energy futures. We believe that green hydrogen in Indonesia is have a huge potential. We have quite enormous renewable energy potential. We estimated around, it can be up to the 3,000 gigawatt that can from renewable energy can be developed for the green hydrogens. At the moment, we have just been starting for the very a small scale one. For example, the wind farm, we in the range just 300 megawatts, solar in up to the 500 megawatts. But we believe that in the futures that we can develop green hydrogen from our renewable energy potential. We estimated that we could produce around 40 to 50 million tons a year by year 2040. In terms of the in the power sector, the use of hydrogen, we will start by early 30. So we estimated that we can reach to the around 50 gigawatt by 2060. And at the moment, all the hydrogen development in our country is in the early stage. So basically, mainly we come from the fossil fuel development. But in terms of the development from the renewable energy, we just been starting in the eastern part of our country to develop hybrids, green hydrogen from solar and wind. But the capacity is very small, only 7 to 8 gigawatt. But the huge potential from our hydro in the the biggest island in Kalimantan and Papua, we believe that we can produce the quite significantly green hydrogen in the futures. And in terms of our position as the G20 presidency, we have several meetings with our member country in G20 that basically we already encourage all the G20 country to start action to achieve its net zero emissions, including the green hydrogen development. Of course, we believe that each country have their different characteristics in green hydrogen development, but I believe they have the similar need of technology and funding. Promoting technologies, sharing access, and financial support must be evenly available among the G20 countries, including knowledge and best practices to sharing. And also in case of Indonesia, we also introduced for the carbon tax on the broader industrial sector and provide attractive financial incentive for public and private sectors to accelerate the new and renewable energy adoption, including the hydrogen as clean energy sources in all aspects, transportation, power generation, and industrial sector. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I'm sure that I can say that you can count on this assembly and this friendly alliance to support your initiatives in this along these lines in the G20 coordination presidency work. So good luck and thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for sharing with us your initiatives at home and also this openness to facilitate the push forward in the context of the G20. And now I would like to move to India. With a different perspective, because we have the big honor to count with us today with on Dr. Sharma, a distinguished professor emeritus at the University of Technology in Queensland, an advisor to the chairman of Adani Group, and leads the group's sustainability function. So I think that the perspective is slightly different. Is how the industry can use and take full advantage of these innovations and how you see things moving forward and what you could like to see in the time to come. The Indian government has demonstrated remarkable leadership in this field, and it is explicitly supporting the green of the hydrogen. So I think that this is very important in this point in time in the discussion. Dr. Arun Sharma, advisor to the chairman on sustainability lead in Adani Group. I would like to ask you what government actions have been useful from an industry perspective and what you are missing, on what could be your pieces of advice to this audience on how to improve our capacity to boost green hydrogen solutions.
Thank you, Deputy Prime Minister, and thank you for your past leadership and continued leadership. And it's a privilege to share this stage with all of us here. I will bring a perspective from the corporate sector, and I'll also bring a perspective on what's happening in India. And it tries to answer some of the questions that we have been discussing, that we all talk about incentives, but where are demand signals? So let me provide a context for India. Prime Minister Modi announced at COP26 a net zero date of 2070. But there is a more earlier important date, and that's 2047, which is 100 years of India's independence from Britain. And one figure that we all must understand is $160 million US. That's what India spends on importing energy each year. And that is going to double if something is not done. So yes, net zero is an important target, but the most important target for India is to get rid of the debilitating yoke of this foreign exchange drain that is keeping it from taking its place amongst the largest economies of the world. That is where green hydrogen comes in. Green hydrogen, for the first time, provides India an opportunity which has already demonstrated great scale in solar and has been able to reduce solar cost at one of the lowest in the world. And they see this as an opportunity to not only address their foreign exchange problem, get energy independence, and at the same time, improve air quality problems. Air quality is not the same thing as greenhouse gas emissions. When you have diesel emissions, the public health benefits by getting rid of diesel emissions are significant. So there are multiple factors at play here. But let me tell you from the corporate sector, what do we see? And I'll come to the things that Indian government is doing and what we expect them to do. From the corporate sector, Adani Group is one of the world's largest renewable energy companies. 25 gigawatts of solar and wind capacity under construction and under operation. And we're on track to be the largest company. We also manufacture solar panels on gigawatts of scale and on wind turbines. We are also India's largest transmission distribution company in the private sector. So we can bring solar, wind to actually improve the utilization factor of electrolyzers. So we're uniquely positioned to see a great opportunity in green hydrogen because of these things. And the chairman last year announced an investment plan of between $50 to $70 billion with partners over the next decade in the green hydrogen value chain. So that's what we see as opportunity. But let me also now bring the perspective of decarbonization. The group, in addition to being a renewable energy powerhouse, owns 13 ports, is India's largest private sector port operator, accounting for 30% of India's port traffic. It accounts for 25% of India's airport traffic. And over the weekend, they suddenly became India's largest cement producer after acquiring Holcim's cement assets. Now, all these sectors and businesses need to decarbonize. No matter how you look at it, green hydrogen is the last mile. You cannot decarbonize shipping and your port business. You cannot decarbonize your airport business because you're responsible for 3,000 feet when the aircraft is there. Their emissions are your emissions. And the cement business, India needs more cement. Its infrastructure is at a very early stage. So you see why as the sustainability officer of the group, every time they acquire something that India needs, I have to start thinking, how is green hydrogen going to help? So that now brings to the Indian government. The Prime Minister Modi obviously announced the National Hydrogen Plan. And like every government, they have come up with the first set of incentives. And they are supply side incentives. And let me tell politicians, supply side incentives are very easy. You have some public finance, you actually give it for a gigawatt factory, and ministers take their pictures, it's tangible, and it makes sense. But it is the demand side incentives that matter. What Indian government has done in the supply side, they will waive interstate like transmission charges. They will provide for green ammonia and green hydrogen land in renewable parks, all sorts of things that you can think. They're even thinking in terms of electrolyzer manufacturing and manufacturing linked incentives. So all that they're thinking like every other government. But what is differentiating India is the demand side incentive. India already uses 6 million tons of hydrogen, roughly half in the refinery sector and roughly half for production of ammonia. Refinery sector is a no-brainer because the cost of hydrogen is 2 to 4% of the final product. So a mandate there is very easy to implement. And a mandate for ammonia also is easy to implement if it is a small amount, 5 or 10%. The cost is not going to be significant. So India is in a position to create demand signals. And that for the private sector is extremely important. And over the last 12 months has galvanized the private sector. We have Renew Power here, Reliance, everyone is now geared towards, they're all waiting for offtake agreements to come for ammonia blending and for the refinery blending. They're also looking at city gas distribution, also looking at green steel, because India has huge amounts of iron ore, but no coking coal. So they see a great opportunity. So we're all waiting for it, but there is one thing that I think cannot be done by a single country alone, and that has to be done at a global level. And I'll come back to that, but that's the answer to your question. That demand side incentives are very difficult, but in India, it's not difficult because it does not have a natural gas industry, which has to be displaced.
I have to say that I have liked it very much, your answers. I think that there are very interesting points on what you said. First, working on the demand side incentives. And I was thinking of not only on air quality or the industrial processes, but also I was remembering the very high temperatures you have been going through in the last weeks. We will be reaching 43 in Sevilla during this week, which is not normal temperature in May, I can assure you. And it's true that this idea of draining resources, both from public budgets, but also from private corporates, is a very positive incentive in terms of the demand side. And that's what you have been going through. I mean, the health, but transportation or cement or steel, or so many good reasons not to drain these resources, even when thinking in political terms and the anniversary to be celebrated and the dependence coming from other countries when importing energy materials. And I think that this is very interesting. And this was a little bit what I tried to underline when thinking on what is the healthy balance between a healthy interdependence in global value chains and making good use, wise use of the resources that are around us. So to ensure that there is a win-win option everywhere. And I think that the response and the situation in each of our countries are very different, but it is a good basis to build this alliance worldwide, to go to Bariloche with much more action in place next year. So thanks a lot for your comment. I'm sure that your colleagues your fellow panelists will also like to come back to you to make some questions and in other directions too. But before that, I would like to introduce Richard Florisone, and I would like to congratulate him because the President and CEO of the International Institute for Sustainable Development recently. No, you have congratulations. It is a great pleasure to count on you. You have unique experience in bringing together the public and private sector and to orientate towards concrete solutions. So full understanding and assessment on the different challenges, but also to think beyond the challenges and try to identify solutions, working together with the industry, the civil society, and the government. So my question to you could be how we can build this alliance, how we can work closer to make this transformation easier, and to ensure that there is this ownership being felt also by the local communities, and that it is the demand side also from the general public is there, and there is a positive experience out of this.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much, Deputy Prime Minister. And let me join others in congratulating and thanking you both for Spain's leadership and your own personal leadership in hydrogen, and continuing with that theme of thanks and congrats to Malcolm and Jonas on the publication of the standard. I'm sure there'll be many more thanks and congrats in the coming days. But as we know, we can't have a market without a standard. So congratulations, this looks really great. You asked big questions at this panel, and my colleagues have given some excellent answers. I thought I would make 3 points maybe to add to this, and some of this have already been made. My first point, I'd say, when governments are trying to embrace this transformation and support it, the first point would be, let's not repeat the mistakes of our fossil fuel past, right? We know that we have to have a massive build out of renewable electricity, even apart from hydrogen, as Adair spoke, even conservative estimates so that we need doubling of renewable electricity by 2050. Other forecasts are higher. Hydrogen will drive that even higher. As we do that massive build out of renewables to support hydrogen, let's make sure we manage it for success. We don't repeat those failures of the past. That includes the local engagement, as the minister from Argentina spoke about, respect for land and water, for indigenous rights. And again, to come back to the standard, I was just thrilled to see that those issues were addressed there. So really well done, because it's not why solve a problem and create a bunch more other problems, right? So well done. Fantastic to see those reflected. My second point, and maybe this is more for governments in the global south as I think about this issue, is to think about hydrogen at home. In other words, yes, exports are important, and in a lot of the European materials or reports, the export market is emphasized. But let's remember, the domestic opportunity, and some of the speakers have spoken to this, are really, really tremendous. McKinsey's report on Brazil just at the end, I think it was in November, sized the market. They said Brazil might have access to, I think it was $4 to $6 billion in an export market, but it was roughly twice that in domestic. And of course, for all countries, the opportunity here is energy security, as we've spoken about, but also the jobs and economic development that go with that, and the opportunity to potentially leapfrog other energy technologies. So if I were a policymaker, particularly in the global south, excitement around export, challenges around export. Again, Adair spoke to transportation, other things we have to work on, but keep the domestic opportunity front and center. And then my third point is maybe a bit technical, but it actually connects to a couple of speakers on this panel. And that my third point would be, let's swap subsidies for success. And that sounds a bit, let me explain what I'm talking about. Swapping subsidies for success. So we already, it exists in most countries around the world, a set of fossil fuel subsidies. And basically what we need to do when we think about a source of finance on the demand side or supply side is let's look for opportunities to stop subsidizing the things we don't want, to start subsidizing the things we do. So a couple of examples. Minister Hans, I'm thrilled to be here with you again. I had the chance to share the stage with you at COP26 when you led that announcement from the UK COP presidency on the halting of overseas finance for unabated fossil fuel projects. That's exactly the kind of thing we need to do, right? Let's halt that, but then use that kind of overseas aid to support green hydrogen development. Fantastic initiative. Similarly, in Indonesia, we know that fossil fuel subsidies are an important and politically sensitive issue in Indonesia. I think in 2020, it was roughly $17 billion US. I'm sure it's much more this year, given how prices have increased. And there's no question, right, that some level of subsidy is needed, to ensure energy security, especially for people at the lowest part of the income ladder. But the question is are there creative ways to restructure those subsidies in ways that you can redirect some of that to hydrogen support? Indonesia, we think at ISD, there's a huge opportunity here. We think that, especially with your plans around carbon pricing, that will be an impressive support for green over blue. And again, for jobs and economic development. So it fits with your plans. It fits with your agenda. I know the fossil fuel subsidy question is very, very sensitive. But are there ways that we can tackle that that support the lowest income folks in this transition, but still create the support you need? And I will say on India, this has worked on the demand side. So there has been billions of dollars formerly in kerosene subsidies over the years. And I think this is really in the last 5 years that a lot of this change has been made, that they've made a swap from kerosene to solar subsidies. And that's reduced emissions, improved efficiency, improve people's lives, because you don't have these kerosene emissions for cooking and light. So there are examples here where we can make that difference. So there are a few thoughts drawing, I think, on some of us on the panel here, but let's continue to try to work together and build this transformation that we all want to see. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I have many questions to all of you, but I would like first to offer you to ask among yourselves any questions you may be thinking of once having heard your colleagues, and ask the audience if they have additional questions. But before that, any question among yourselves?
We have to ask Arun. He said he had the one answer, the one global thing that we needed to do together. So I think that was hanging there.
So what pains me is that we can accelerate the green hydrogen economy much further. So if you look at the cost structure of producing green hydrogen, we have done analysis. Every Indian company has done analysis. We can produce green hydrogen by using electrolyzers and the Indian bill of materials at less than $3 US a kilogram. At that price, it's already in the money with diesel. So heavy duty trucks waiting till 2040 pains me. And the same thing, it can happen in Australia. Then people will tell you, oh, the fuel cells are expensive. It's total nonsense. The moment you start making 10,000 fuel cells, the CapEx doesn't matter. It is the OpEx. But the problem that we have is at the electrolyzer where we have produced green hydrogen, we are in the money. The fuel cell with volumes, we are in the money. It is the distance between the electrolyzer and the fuel cell. It's the cost of delivered hydrogen. And that's where breakthroughs need to happen. And they're business model breakthroughs, not any serious technological breakthrough. So our transportation and handling has been basically based on gas distributors, industrial gas companies, which were based on the economics of refining and ammonia production in the chemical industry, and it worked. So you now have liquefaction, compression, trucks that compress, then you have liquefied trucks, you have refueling stations. Each of these things need to be unbundled. And what we need is standards that actually basically say you can compete to provide a liquefaction system. You can actually have a liquefied truck. It is very similar to what happens in the tech industry. Anali Saxenian said, we had companies like DEC and Wong in Boston's Route 128. They were vertically integrated, word processor, database, operating system, everything same. Silicon Valley went on open architecture. anyone could produce anything and hook up with anything else. What that creates, a global standard will create for a liquefaction company to come up with volumes of liquefaction reduced cost. And we can bring the cost of delivering hydrogen from the electrolyzer to the fuel cell significantly. And hopefully, an organization like the Green Hydrogen Assembly that has developed ability to get multiple stakeholders together towards standards could actually look at unbundling the distribution and the transportation of hydrogen, because that's where it will get to the fuel cell. And I think, like, and I'm sure, Malcolm, Australia should move all its heavy duty trucks for a country that can't even have 90 days of fuel reserves, not to use green hydrogen for its heavy duty trucking is an absolute disgrace. Well, I'm sorry to sort of like, put you on the spot, but yeah. Anyway, so that's where I think we need a global standard for unbundling of the distribution chain between electrolyzers and fuel cells.
I think that this is a very interesting point, and I would comment a little bit in a broader context, and then I would like to open the floor to the audience, because I think that we feel so positive and so constructive that we also need to pay attention to whatever constraints, difficulties, and social challenges we need to anticipate. And it's true that this idea of how we can unbundle these different streams, what does it mean in terms of access to materials, or how we can avoid bottlenecks also in the production of goods and equipment, but how we can ensure that we keep on going to increase the performance of what we produce, or more primary and simple, how we can ensure that there is a social support to go so. I mean, green hydrogen is produced by or with renewable energy. Wind and solar, wind and sun do not belong to anyone. Land belongs to many people, or at least many people think that they have an interest to pay attention to what it happens on land, or in the case of offshore, it's competing for other uses. So I think it could also be interesting to have some insights from your side on where you think there may be issues to pay attention, to be sure that we do not make the same mistakes, but that we also are able to open our minds to anticipate what's eventual additional barriers, difficulties, or constraints may be there. So I wonder to what extent there is anyone already paying attention to this type of question marks, and any comment on that. And then I would like to pay attention to these other members of the assembly. Anyone willing to comment on that? Greg?
I think, thank you, Teresa. And I think in terms of if I understood your question correctly, sort of what do we need to be looking at for challenges coming up? I think many governments, my governments are not unique in this regard, are all setting sort of similar or broadly similar strategies, maybe a bit of difference on blue hydrogen, the role that plays, a bit of difference on speed, a bit of difference on technique, etc. I think we have to be careful that we don't end up sort of all kind of over competing to get to the same place, and we all end up effectively, our taxpayers, overpaying to develop this capability, because people who provide the relatively limited amount of resources, whether it be the electrolyzers, whether it be the skills, all sort of see various governments all kind of competing, and puts us in some kind of horrible sort of auction process. I think is going to be one of the challenges for us in government, is how do we, of course, there has to be a certain amount of competition, but how do we cooperate and how do we make sure that our taxpayers don't all sort of lose in a race to create this capability all at the same time? So I think as much as we can cooperate together, work with the sector, work with the industry, work with the end users, particularly industrial end users, I think the better. I think that is going to be one of our key challenges going forward, not just in hydrogen, but I think in various forms of renewable energy as well. A similar picture, people are setting really ambitious targets. We have to reach those targets to get to net zero. How do we make sure that we ensure taxpayer value for money for our general taxpayer, who also, by the way, are the same taxpayers who are paying the current high bills for high hydrocarbon prices as well. So what you don't want to do is to hammer your taxpayer twice, once with high hydrocarbon prices, and then coming along by effectively potentially overpaying for future technologies, which we know that we all have to do. I think that is a key part of the challenge, I think, for us as politicians.
Thank you. So here there is someone raising his hand and someone raising her hand, which is very good, having her hands and not only his hands.
Thank you so much, and thank you for your leadership. It's really great to hear about all the great plans. I wanted to return to one of the points that Dr. Sharma raised around how do we incentivize the demand. I work with the shipping industry. We saw this morning that the shipping industry is really one of those that really needs those liquid hydrogen-derived fuels. And one of the frustrations we sometimes have is we're listening to the ministry responsible for energy, the climate ministers talking about, yes, we need to push that demand. We need to push the green hydrogen. We're with you. You need to decarbonize. Then we move over when we have the international negotiations. We have negotiations going on at the moment in Europe. We have negotiations going on at the IMO. And here the transport ministers are saying, oh, don't go too fast. It's going to be too expensive. Let's wait and see what happens. And what we really need to see, and my big request of you is, can we have a whole of government approach where we tie in the supply supporting policies and the demand and find those solutions so we start sending that demand signal? In Europe, there are proposals from some governments to set a 3% target for e-fuels in 2030, 3%. We need to start sending that demand signal, but a lot of European countries are saying it's too expensive. We don't want to go down that route. But we know our prime ministers are committed to zero in 2050. We know shipping is going to need that. Can we have that whole of government approach and take those steps that we need to take to get there? Thank you.
As the only minister from the European Union here, I take note of your comment, and I think that this is where we need to be. So acting together and being consistent also with the pathway, so to ensure that this works in the different sectors, including the maritime transport. But there was someone here.
Yes. Hello. Thank you, Teresa, for the moderation and for your presentation before. My name is Alicia Carrasco. I'm the CEO of Olivo Energy, and I have two questions for each of you. The first one is when are you going to have operating a green hydrogen industry, or the first site in your countries? And the second one is how you gonna guide for having renewable energy for electricity consumption and at the same time renewable energy production towards hydrogen, which I think is the main challenge, or a big challenge. Thank you very much.
So I think as I said, India is focusing on the demand signal. As soon as the auctions are there, you will actually have the construction. 2 years, the construction will be there. The projects will be, they will make final investment decision. So everyone has already put their partnerships and plan, and they're waiting for the gun to go. Now, there is an incentive actually for people to build new renewable energy for hydrogen. Renewable energy, in a way, is becoming a commodity. Hydrogen is high value add on a commodity. So the business incentives already exist. If you're going to invest in a land, and if you only do a PPA agreement, then you can actually make hydrogen and it gives you greater return. You can make green steel and you get even greater return. And so I'm not worried about that. I think people will be able to build renewable energy going forward. But let me just quickly answer that question about the shipping, because that is actually important, and there is a dimension that we haven't talked about. The International Maritime Union actually is a very progressive body, and they're doing great things, and we will do that. But we should not forget that other than governments, consumers are also a driver. If you ask consumers today, are you prepared to pay 10 cents more or 50 cents more for the t-shirt you buy, which actually came from a ship that was working on green ammonia? I think most consumers will probably be able to say, okay, yes, I will pay that. Because the cost of replacing it with green ammonia to a t-shirt or to a refrigerator is actually not significant in terms of that. So what is again needed is a transparent system that you can say that this ship was using green ammonia and this container came on this ship, and here I am doing it and using an electric vehicle to supply it to Macy's or to David Jones in Australia. And so again, the ability of the green hydrogen community to build these transparent layers where signals can actually be, the consumers are prepared to go, but they're looking for a trusted system. Okay, so we shouldn't just put all our faith in government. There is a consumer power, but what we need to build is that layer of transparency, which the consumer is going to actually support us. And I think that's, again, it's all beginning of the journey.
Thank you. Richard, I don't know if you want to comment on this or merit order when using renewable energy, or you don't want to make any comment?
I mean, not too much, except to say that, I mean, there's no question that hydrogen, as we heard, will increase the demands on renewable energy. And we do have a problem. So even in Canada, that, it's not clear that we actually have a plan to double that supply. But I think I agree with Arun that this will, hydrogen actually, by giving another use case to that renewable electricity, it actually makes it more attractive, right? Including when you've got excess renewables that you can divert it to hydrogen production. So there's obviously a lot of details to be worked out here, but it should not be as competitive as it first sounds. It actually should increase the business case and the attractiveness and the ROI of developing renewable energy.
Yeah, thanks. I'll just say a couple of things. I think in terms of intensifying demand, you're absolutely right. The way I would do it is like a mixture of carrot and stick, if you like. The carrot is often is cheaper, particularly anything renewable related at the moment is very largely cheaper than anything hydrocarbon related. But if you do have to ban something or change something, then go with the grain of human nature, I would say. So the worst thing for the government to be doing at the moment is going to knock on people's doors and ask them to take out their gas boiler and say, you've got to buy something new and expensive instead. Instead, you should be thinking about when the consumer or even the business has to replace what it's using at the moment, and then incentivizing that consumer to replace it with a more environmentally friendly product. So not kind of going by and saying, sorry, that is now not allowed. Thinking in terms of actually you're coming up to a decision here for your household or your business. What are you going to be doing in the future? And making sure that the greener option is at least as attractive as the polluting option. And make sure that make the polluting option more difficult to operate, in the sense that there might not be the infrastructure in place for that polluting option, but generally I think you want to go with the grain of human nature. When does that decision point come, rather than forcing that decision point too early. I think in terms of when are we operating green hydrogen in the UK, I'd say in the next few years. We are getting on with it. I think it's I'd be reluctant to put a specific date on it, but we do, in terms of the targets that we want. I think our target is 1 gigawatt of production by the year 2025, which is doesn't sound very much. To be 10 by 2030, we will have to have something, I think, in the year some more serious production, probably in the year 2024. I think in terms of hydrogen production with excess renewables, there's not much in the way of excess renewables at the moment, but there will be. I mentioned the UK. We've got, for example, Europe's largest installed offshore wind sector. We're going to quadruple that. We don't, there will be times when there obviously is going to be too much wind. And what do we do with that? And obviously hydrogen is going to be part of that answer. And that is also part of what makes an attractive proposition for the government going forward, is to be able to produce that hydrogen. We've already, I opened installation at the big wind farm south of Glasgow, really as an early example of doing that. I think we'll see a lot more of that in terms of renewable energy with hydrogen installed, hydrogen production capability installed alongside. So I think that is a big future for that.
Matías, Ego, if you want to make some final comments on the question.
Sí, gracias, Teresa. Yo quería agregar que también estamos trabajando en un proyecto de ley de electromovilidad que justamente contempla las dos dimensiones. Es un proyecto que incentiva la fabricación de vehículos de cero contaminación, y también incentiva la demanda. Es decir, también le va a proponer a los consumidores un conjunto de bonos que puedan reducir el costo de los vehículos de cero contaminación, justamente para poder lograr esta conjunción. En el medio, obviamente, estamos trabajando en fortalecer una oferta exportable, porque al igual que mencionaba el colega de la India, necesitamos generar un marco de sostenibilidad. Nosotros estamos convencidos de que la sostenibilidad ambiental no será posible si no viene acompañado de sostenibilidad macroeconómica y sostenibilidad social. La macroeconómica, en nuestro caso, se da en lograr esquemas de equilibrios en el sector externo, es decir, reduciendo en muchos casos la dependencia de importaciones y pudiendo tener un superávit comercial que nos permita equilibrar nuestras cuentas externas, y por supuesto el crecimiento para generar también cuentas fiscales más equilibradas. Y desde el punto de vista de la sostenibilidad social, obviamente esto es el desarrollo de un sector de energías renovables, de hidrógeno verde, que nos permite también generar empleo, puestos de trabajo, desarrollo de las comunidades. Así que con este enfoque de triple sostenibilidad es que estamos trabajando el desarrollo de esta industria.
Thank you, Teresa. Sorry. In case of Indonesia is the green hydrogen development, we are focused basically from the hybrid development between solar and wind. And because from our total potential mainly is, if we can make a prioritization, is the solar, wind, and hydro. And also one of another opportunity for the green hydrogen development in Indonesia is come from the development of geothermal condensate, from the production of geothermal to produce electricity. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I think that time is over, but I would like to make two comments. One of them is to wrap up some of the keywords that we have been hearing during this slot, this panel. So paying attention to the domestic side and of course, taking into consideration the economics of the exports, but also paying attention to the domestic advantages and what for and how it can work. Stressing the need to cooperate instead of compete. We are at the kickoff of very promising solutions for the problems we've got, and for that we need to keep this cooperative mood. Not creating or not recreating old problems, and work on the additional incentives, also paying attention to the demand side. There are many reasons why this is a very promising and optimistic approach to the response that we need to put in place to table down. And I think that we need to work on that. And in that context, also working on shipping and final clients of shipping is also important, so that the demand side also comes at the end of the corridors in the right direction. So thanks so much, Matthias, Greg, Ego, Aaron, and Richard, for this very interesting conversation, which will continue, if I'm not wrong, with some glass of wine in the surroundings. Is it okay? So thanks a lot. I ask for an applause to this fantastic panel.